So last year, I'm walking down a street in London, just near Piccadilly Circus, and I go past a gallery, and there's this photo in the window. I know instantly it's the one I've been looking for, so I walk in and I buy it. Now, it's all because of someone you haven't heard of, a man called Colin Stansfield Smith. He's a renowned British architect who was knighted by Her Majesty the Queen for his services to architecture, and he was also my godfather. He was an important person to me. He was creative and nurturing. He introduced me to Pink Floyd and Frank Lloyd Wright, and he always treated me as an equal and supported the choices I made in my life. The most important one, obviously, being accepting the Morehead Scholarship to the University of North Carolina, while others around me were suggesting a safer course in the UK. Anyway, Colin died, sadly, 2 years ago, and in his will he left me a sum of money, no strings attached, and I knew I wanted to buy a single thing with it, a work of art that would remind me of him and everything that he stood for. And I didn't know what it was going to be until I saw this photo, and weirdly enough, it cost exactly what he'd left me in his will. So it was taken in Chicago in 1966, the year of my birth, and it's of a sailor enjoying a cigarette on the verge of going to a movie theatre to see the epic western How the West Was Won, starring John Wayne and Jimmy Stewart, presumably while his fellow sailors were enjoying themselves on shore leave elsewhere and in other pursuits. I could be wrong, I'm just guessing, but I loved the photo as soon as I saw it, and it now sits in pride of place on my wall at home in London. But there's more to it than that. It's not just the photo that I was drawn to, it was also the photographer who took it. Now, most of you won't have heard of her either. Her name was Vivian Maier, and she wasn't actually a photographer at all. She was a nanny in the Chicago suburbs in the 1950s and 60s, and she used to take this box camera with her into the city whenever she went, either on her own or with the children she was looking after. And she photographed what she saw in front of her, American life in all its impoverished glory, with this unerring eye. And she took about 100,000 photos in her life. And I've only seen a fraction of them, but here are a couple of my favorites. So I love this boxer. Love this woman's expression, looking a little startled. Fantastic expression as well. A man on a horse in a street. A guy with a pigeon. And here's Vivian. So, as you can see, she has a style all her own. She was very tall, gangly, and a little bit awkward, but her photos are anything but. In fact, I consider her body of work to be one of the most remarkable in the history of street photography. And she occasionally took reflections of herself in shop windows or mirrors. 60 selfies 60 years before the word even existed. And the funny thing is, during her lifetime, not a single one of her photos was ever seen by anyone except herself. So I own my photo because of another person you haven't heard of, a young collector from Chicago called John Maloof. And he was working on a book about his neighborhood that needed some photographic illustration in the northeast of Chicago. And he went to the auction of the contents of a storage unit where the rent had lapsed, and he bought this box of negatives, sight unseen, in the hope that it had some pictures of his neighborhood. He opened it up, he looked at the photos, and it didn't. So he just put the box away and got on and finished the book. But something made him come back to the box. He opened it and he really looked at these pictures and realized that he'd stumbled across a treasure trove. And from there, like a young Sherlock Holmes, he started to put the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle of Vivian Maier's life together. And he collected a lot more of her belongings and many, many other photos. And he discovered that she'd actually died just recently in 2009 at the age of 83. and she'd been a recluse. There was no heir, and she was the end of her line. And so she made it her mission, John made it his mission to tell the story of her life and to give her the recognition that she denied herself in her lifetime and to shine a spotlight on this unsung hero. So he decided to make a film and tell the whole story, and it's called Finding Vivian Maier, and it was released to great acclaim and went on to win an Oscar nomination, and it's amazing, and I heartily recommend it. So I wanted to tell this story here because I think there's an essence of Morehead-Cain to it. I see our community as being one of unsung heroes, and like the three people in the chain to the photo, we have our own architects, filmmakers, and photographers, and many more besides. And while we have some very illustrious alumni who we rightly celebrate, most of us left here as scholars at UNC and tried to make a difference in the world on our own terms, but under the radar and away from the headlines, and without reward or recognition. And it's why I love the program and why I love this forum, because it gives us an opportunity to get together and hear and celebrate what we've all achieved, and then support and encourage each other in what we hope to achieve in the future. So when I look at the photo back at my home in London, it makes me realize how much I love my heroes unsung. Like Vivian, like John, like Colin, like the mysterious sailor serving his country and enjoying an afternoon movie, and like you guys, many of whom I'm lucky enough to know, and the rest I hope to get to know during this weekend and at other times. So if you'll indulge me for one last moment, I'd like to follow in Vivian's footsteps with a panoramic lens and document this moment in celebration of unsung heroes here and everywhere. Go Heels!